Hello, and welcome to Mixed Mattaphors, spreading the good news of books, metal, and video games. So, today is a books episode. Those books actually seem like they're facing the wrong way, don't they? They're not. Oh, wait. It's reversed for me, but I don't think it will be when it's actually on the video. So, indeed. So I have quite the calendar coming together. Way more, or at least a little more elaborate. Or maybe I just put it into Excel so it looks more elaborate than what I talked about on last Friday's video. And it's going well. However, I have a couple of weeks before that starts with Atlas Shrugged. And in those couple of weeks, I would like to finish two books. The book I would like to finish, perhaps foremost, is The Witcher Last Wish book. And part of the motivation is that I have it as my book one of my 7 book reading list, and so that's apart from the calendar, or at least I think it is. I don't have any overlapping books there, but this is the first book on there, and so I'd like to finish it. This became one of my soggy books. I have a few soggy books that fell in the tub or whatever else. This, 12 Rules for Life, I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. And, and one that I may show you here. But, so, Last Wish, it's okay so far. I heard Christopher Rocchio on a Mike's Book Reviews thing, I think. Or maybe it was on one of his own things. But he was pretty damning about the translation into English of The Witcher, or of The Last Wish, and perhaps all of the Witcher ones, although it'd be strange if he read the whole series and was that damning about it. Who knows? I mean, that might have been the book that he read, because it's the first one, if he did indeed read one, rather than just, either just making it up, I guess, his analysis, and I doubt he would, or just reading a little sample or something. From what I've read so far, it's all right. I think it's interesting. It's interesting enough content, but the writing is it feels a little bland, and I heard that, I think he might have said that, the writer is Andrzej Sapkowski, the writer of the original, the Polish version, is known as a stylist in Polish, but this is translated. Whom is it translated by? By the way, quick way you can tell if it's who or whom. I learned this from a professor in college. Copy editing professor. He was pretty good. Quick way you can tell who from whom is just say, would you use he or him in that sentence? Who is doing the action? And would you use he or him? Essentially, you're saying, is it a subject or a direct object? Which is pretty simple, it seems like such a mysterious thing, but it's really you're figuring out the who or whom thing every time you say something about a third person, pronoun. Interestingly enough, every time you use a third person pronoun that's gender specific, not a they, which is a plural non-gender specific, although, in college it wasn't for a or at least I wasn't aware of it as some kind of gender activism thing. It was just like, oh, I've always used they as like a generic third person pronoun for even a singular. If I like when the student gets here, tell them to come to the front, then they will see us there, or something like that. It's like it's one student, but that's in that sentence at least. It seems strange they wouldn't know who the student was if if it was unknown. I don't know if it's supposed to be an unknown in that sentence, in whatever context that sentence like might have belonged in. Like if that were something someone was actually saying, they'd likely know who the student was, unless it was some kind of like prize thing and they didn't know who was going to win, and they're like, the student who wins, blah blah blah. That I guess you could see that. But in any case, they're academics and they should know better, assuming they're academics from the perspective of the statement and what the statement is saying, or the seeming perspective of the statement. The sentence could go, or the sentences, I suppose, could go quite a different way if it were otherwise, or if it had been otherwise, if it was otherwise. Or I guess were, because it's you sort of wondering what it would be. And look at this paltry book display behind me. It is kind of funny. It looks a little spindly. I did put these up on purpose. I thought, it would be cool to have some books up for some like book-themed videos, or just in general for mixed metaphors. I thought to even put some CDs and video games up. I could do the cases for either of those, or each of them. But this is just tobacco, by the way. But so I'd like to finish in the next 2 weeks. I'd like to finish before January, The Last Wish, which I've read up until page. I've been going very slowly through this, as with a lot of other things that I haven't finished. I've read it until page 50, so that's something. And then Homeland as well, the first of the Drizzt Do'Urden books. And it seems like, oh, Matt, you're a big fancy reader. It's like, yeah, look at the books behind me. This is, there are a couple fancy ones there. Feet of Clay, which I'm not sure if I've read. I think I might have read this, or I might have read Men-at-Arms. Maybe I've read both of them, but for some reason, the thought is like I might not have read one of those, but I did read the other one or something. I think I might have read Feet of Clay, if not Men-at-Arms. Like if there's one that I didn't read, maybe it would be Men-at-Arms, because I think I might have read Feet of Clay. Anyway, I've read Terry Pratchett books, and that's, the Discworld series. It's sort of fantasy. Well, it is fantasy, but it's like kind of satirical fantasy, like sort of Monty Python and the Holy Grail kind of fantasy. At pretty high quality, too, as they are said to be. And then, I get Monty Python, pretty high quality stuff, I suppose. I haven't seen much of their stuff other than the Holy Grail. But then The Hobbit there. But, look at all these. This isn't fantasy stuff. I've got Ray Bradbury there. I was a big Bradbury fan, but, still not fantasy. Holes, I suppose, is the fantasy of getting the story the way it was supposed to be, rather than in the movie where the character is not actually fat, and so, like, half of the character drama and half of the drama as related to the physically grueling tasks of what the character is doing is just gone. It's like, oh, it's just Shia LaBeouf, I think it is, looking like strangely tall, maybe older. I just remember thinking like, wow, he's really tall. Or was he tall? He might have been tall in the book too, but in the book he was really fat, and in the movie it was like, really? Like, he's not fat? Like, it was like, wow, like that was a huge part of the book. Like probably 80 pages, if not more, of the book refer to him being fat, and like have to do with like him being fat pretty intimately. So I mean, it's not like it's a children's book, but it does have to do with him being fat. And then I'm also reading currently, although who knows if I'm going to keep reading it, but the first book of Malazan, Book of the Fallen. I think it might be pronounced Malazan because I thought the city is Malaz, or like the country or whatever it's named after is Malaz. And then it's like, well, if it's the Malazan Book of the Fallen, that's like America and then the American Book of the Fallen. So it's the Malaz, the Malazan, right? People say, like Mike from Mike's Book Review says Malazan. And, you know, I like the I like the sound of Malazan. I will say it should probably be two Z's if it's really the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So, interestingly enough, I think during this video's runtime, like right here, I uh, I hadn't, until then, I really hadn't thought about the spelling and how, yeah, or maybe on some level, like I was sort of feeling the spelling, but I don't know if I really thought, like, if it was Malazan and it sounded like Malazan, you'd think you'd just add another Z to there. So it's the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So it is spelled strange. Maybe it's Malays and then the Malazan. It might be the Malazan Book of the Fallen. That kind of makes sense because you put it's the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's the Malazan Book of the Fallen. That's the pronunciation. And maybe I will actually read it. Read this here. And read it. But I'm pretty excited to have these books to read going forward. And just to sort of show off another book, I read part of Rabbit Run years ago, and I was like, "Oh, this is really good." And then I might have thrown out the book, or just I'm not sure where it is. But in any case, I saw on Amazon. I looked up because I looked up John Updike. I was looking for John Updike interview just to be like, "What's this guy all about?" You know, like because he seems to be a pretty good writer, or a pretty interesting one. And anyway, he mentioned the tetralogy, and they were talking about it being published all in one edition. So this is the 4 Rabbit Angstrom books. It's like, I think a little more or a little less than the 1,500 page mark.